Have you ever wondered if something as small as a duck accessory could actually make Jimin stop and pay attention? Not a huge stage moment. Not a spectacular performance. Not a carefully planned interaction. Just a tiny, adorable duck accessory worn by an army. And yet, that little detail appears to have caught Jimin's attention. And suddenly, fans had one question on their minds. What happened next? Why did this tiny object stand out in a sea of thousands of fans? Why did Jimin appear to notice it? And most importantly, was there something about his reaction that ARMY might have missed at first? Today we are taking a closer look at this intriguing moment and the emotional story behind it. But before we go any further, there is something important to remember. Short fan-recorded clips can capture only a few seconds of an event. We cannot know exactly what Jimin was thinking simply by looking at his expression or body language. So rather than turning a brief reaction into an unconfirmed theory, we are going to focus on what can actually be observed and why that moment became so meaningful to fans. Because sometimes, the smallest moments tell the most beautiful stories. Imagine the scene. Jimin is surrounded by an enormous crowd. There are fans everywhere. Light sticks are glowing. Cameras are recording. Banners are being held up. Voices are calling his name from every direction. In an environment like that, it would be impossible for any performer to notice every single detail. There are simply too many faces. Too many signs. Too many movements. And then somehow, one tiny object appears to stand out. A duck. Small. Simple. Almost insignificant if you look at it by itself. But when Jimin appears to notice it, ARMY notices too. Suddenly, fans begin looking more closely at the moment. They start paying attention to his direction of gaze, his expression, his movement, and the reaction that follows. And this is where the internet does what it does best. A few seconds become a conversation. One fan sees a funny moment. Another sees a sweet interaction. Someone else wonders whether Jimin recognized the significance of the accessory. And suddenly, what might have been an ordinary moment becomes something fans want to understand. But why a duck? That is where this story becomes much more interesting. For someone outside the BTS fandom, a duck accessory may simply be a cute decoration. But fandom culture works differently. Within a passionate community, small objects can become symbols. Colors can become symbols. Characters can become symbols. Accessories can become symbols. Even a simple emoji can carry a meaning understood instantly by thousands of people. That is one of the most fascinating things about modern fandom. Fans develop their own visual language. They recognize references that might be completely invisible to someone watching from the outside. And when an idol appears to recognize one of those symbols, the moment can feel incredibly personal. Maybe Jimin simply noticed something cute. Maybe the accessory caught his eye because it was visually distinctive. Maybe he recognized the symbol. Or perhaps it was simply a spontaneous reaction with no deeper meaning at all. We cannot know for certain. But that uncertainty is exactly what creates the curiosity. Because when a moment lasts only a few seconds, fans naturally begin asking questions. Did Jimin really stop? Did he smile? Did his expression change? Did he look again? Was there another interaction immediately afterward? These questions may sound small, but for a dedicated fan, they can turn one short clip into a treasured memory. And that is where the emotional side of this story begins. Imagine being the ARMY holding that little duck accessory. Perhaps you have supported Jimin for years. Perhaps you discovered BTS during a difficult period in your life. Maybe their music was there when you needed comfort. Maybe a particular song became part of a memory you will never forget. Maybe you have watched Jimin grow as an artist through different eras, different stages, different hairstyles, different performances, and different chapters of his life. And after all those years, you finally get the opportunity to be in the same place. You do not have to give him something expensive. You do not need a huge banner. You do not need a complicated message. You simply bring a tiny object that makes you smile. A little duck. And then for a brief moment, Jimin appears to notice it. For another person, that might be nothing. For that fan, it could become a memory they carry for the rest of their life. That is something people sometimes misunderstand about fandom. The connection between an artist and a fan is not always about direct personal relationships. It can also be about shared memories, music, comfort, inspiration, moments of happiness, moments of strength. A song can accompany someone through an important chapter of their life. A performance can become connected to a personal memory. A simple message from an artist can make someone feel encouraged at exactly the right moment. So when that artist responds, even briefly, to something a fan is holding, the emotional impact can be much larger than the interaction itself. And that is why this duck accessory became interesting. It is not really about the duck. It is about what the duck represents. Attention, recognition, connection, and the possibility that even for just a few seconds, a fan felt seen. That feeling is powerful, especially for longtime fans. Because being a fan from a distance can sometimes feel strange. You know an artist through their music, interviews, performances, and public appearances, but they do not know you personally. Millions of people can share the same admiration. So when a tiny moment seems to create a bridge between the stage and the audience, it can feel incredibly special. That is why fans often remember seemingly insignificant interactions. A wave, a smile, a glance, a gesture toward a sign, a reaction to an accessory. These moments may not make headlines in traditional entertainment news, but within a fandom, they can become unforgettable. And there is another fascinating element here. K-pop fandoms are not simply audiences. They are communities. Fans communicate with one another. They create traditions. They share symbols. They develop inside jokes. They recreate memorable moments. They wear similar accessories. They bring recognizable objects to concerts and events. And sometimes those symbols become part of the atmosphere itself. So when an idol notices one of them, it feels as if two sides of the same community have briefly connected. The artist sees something the fans understand. The fans see the artist reacting to something they recognize. And for a few seconds, there is a shared moment. That is what makes this story more meaningful than a simple Jimin saw a duck headline. It becomes a small example of how modern fandom works. But we should also be careful. There is a difference between appreciating a moment and creating a story that the evidence cannot support. A smile does not automatically reveal someone's thoughts. A glance does not necessarily mean recognition. And stopping for a moment does not automatically mean that a specific object caused the reaction. That distinction matters. Because Jimin, like every public figure, deserves to have his actions interpreted responsibly. We can enjoy the sweetness of the moment without claiming to know what was happening inside his mind. And honestly, perhaps that makes the moment even more beautiful. Maybe there was no secret message. Maybe there was no hidden meaning. Maybe Jimin simply saw something adorable in the crowd and reacted naturally. But isn't that enough? Sometimes a moment does not need a dramatic explanation to become meaningful. Sometimes a genuine smile is enough. Sometimes being noticed for 1 second is enough. Sometimes a fan does not need a huge interaction. They simply need one small memory to take home. And perhaps that is exactly what makes these moments so emotionally powerful for longtime ARMY. Because as people grow older, they often realize that memories are not always created during the biggest events. Sometimes the memories that stay with us are surprisingly ordinary. A look, a sound, a song, a smile, a small object. Something that happened in a crowded room that somehow felt personal. And for one ARMY, that little duck accessory may become exactly that kind of memory. But now comes the question that has made this story so intriguing. Did he simply continue moving? Did his expression change? Did the fan receive another reaction? Did the surrounding army notice what was happening? Or was there another tiny detail hidden in the footage that made the moment even more interesting? This is where slowing down the story becomes important. Because sometimes the most interesting part of a short interaction is not the first reaction. It is what happens immediately afterward. The people around the moment may react. The fan may react. Jimin may continue moving. The camera may shift. And in those few seconds, another detail can easily be missed. That is why fans often replay these clips. Not necessarily because they are searching for some secret theory. Sometimes they simply want to experience the moment again. They want to see the smile again. They want to hear the crowd reaction again. They want to remember what it felt like to witness something unexpectedly sweet. And this is one of the reasons social media has transformed fandom culture. Years ago, a small interaction might have existed only as a memory for the person who witnessed it. Today, a fan can record it. Another fan can share it. Someone else can slow it down. Thousands of people can discuss it. And suddenly, a moment that lasted only seconds becomes part of a much larger collective memory. That is exactly how fandom stories grow. One person notices something. Another person confirms it. Someone else adds context. And eventually, the community begins asking the same question. Did you see that? In this case, the answer appears to be yes. Many fans saw the duck. Many noticed Jimin's reaction. And many became curious about what happened next. But there is still a deeper question underneath all of this. Why do moments like this matter so much? Why can something as simple as an accessory create such a strong emotional reaction? The answer may be connection. We want to feel seen. We want our efforts to matter. And when someone we admire acknowledges something we did, even unintentionally, it can create a powerful emotional response. For an army, bringing an accessory to an event may be a tiny gesture, but it can also be a way of saying, I am here. I support you. I remember the things that make this fandom special. I wanted to share a little piece of that joy with you. And if Jimin notices it, even briefly, that gesture feels complete. The message was sent. And perhaps for a moment, it was received. That is the emotional heart of this entire story. Not the duck. Not the camera. Not even the speculation. But the simple human desire to connect. And perhaps this is one reason why Jimin's interactions with fans continue to resonate so strongly. His appeal is not only about performance. It is also about the emotional atmosphere he creates around those moments. The little gestures. The expressions. The warmth. The spontaneity. The feeling that something unscripted has happened. Of course, every interpretation should remain an interpretation. But we can still appreciate what the moment represents. A fan brought something small. Jimin appeared to notice. And an ordinary moment suddenly became a memory. That is enough to make it special. But the story does not end there. Because after that initial moment, ARMY began asking another question. What exactly happened next? And that is where the second half of this story becomes even more interesting. In part 2, we will look more closely at the reactions surrounding the moment, why fans found it so emotional, how small symbols can become powerful within fandom culture, and what this seemingly simple interaction can teach us about the unique relationship between artists and the people who support them. Because sometimes the biggest stories do not begin with something dramatic. Sometimes they begin with something tiny. A little duck. A crowded audience. And one moment when Jimin seemed to stop and look. So before you leave, I want to hear from you. If you were the ARMY wearing that duck accessory, what would you feel if Jimin noticed it? Would you freeze? Would you cry? Would you laugh? Or would you simply smile and remember that moment forever? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe that the smallest interactions can sometimes create the biggest memories, let us know with a purple heart. Because in the end, perhaps the most beautiful part of being an army is not always seeing something extraordinary. Sometimes it is being there when something ordinary suddenly becomes unforgettable. And maybe that little duck was never really just a duck. Maybe it was a tiny reminder of the connection between an artist and the people who have been cheering for him all along.